Okay, hello everybody, my name is Peter. Today I'm going to show you a brand new doodling method I just came up with in the shower yesterday, so I haven't even tried it myself. This is good for anyone who doesn't know how to start a drawing, doesn't know what to draw, and it could help people who have writer's block as well. I'm not sure, I'm not much of a writer. The idea is that you draw each section of your doodle has a little section of a story that goes along with it, and you make up all of it as you go. Each section of doodle, each section of story, it all goes hand in hand, and you don't need to know any of it ahead of time. So I'm going to go ahead and start and demonstrate this. All I know is that I think I'm going to start with once upon a time. So let's see how it goes. Okay. Once upon a time, there were two cows. These cows were very, very long, and they were trundling down the countryside road. They were so long that their bellies scraped on the road as they walked. But they were used to this. Their bellies had calluses. They trundled, which is a fancy word for walking slowly with a bit of style. And as they walked, they looked at their surroundings, and their surroundings looked at them. Some of their surroundings were people. One person said, "Mommy, why are those two cows so long?" But Mommy didn't hear the little kid who was asking this question because she was playing on her phone and she had her AirPods in. And so the little kid just kept on looking and wondering. And eventually he started following them, and Mommy didn't notice. The little child followed the two cows for 14 years. Time went by, and he grew up to be a young man. He forgot about the cows. He forgot why he first started walking. He forgot what took him away from home and for what reason he first started walking. One day he found himself down by the coast, and there was a dock, a nice wooden dock with 3 or maybe 4 boats at it, and he thought, maybe I'd like to go and sail on a boat and see what it's like to be out on the ocean. That's a good idea, going out on the ocean. I've only ever read books about being on the ocean, he said. Maybe I could become a sailor, find fame and fortune that way. He looked at all the boats that were there, and there was one little one. It was just a little rowboat, and that didn't make him very excited. So he looked at the next boat, which was a little chubby tugboat. And no, that wasn't quite right for him either. It didn't seem like it had a lot of, I don't know, grandiosity, even though he did like all of the tires along the side of it. That created a cool pattern and a cool texture. The third and final boat that was there was really long and he didn't know why, but he liked long things ever since he was little, and so he went down the dock and found the owner of the long boat and asked if he could become part of the crew. And the owner said, "Well, do you have any experience at sea?" And the little boy, who was now a man actually, said, "No, I really have just been, well, now that you mention it, I've just been following two cows around for most of my life. I forgot I had been doing that." And the boat owner looked at him and said, "Well, I really only am hiring people with some amount of experience." And the young man, who I'm going to tell you now, his name was Jome. Jome, yes. He said, "How am I ever going to get any experience if people are only ever hiring people with experience?" And the boat owner looked at him and said, "Well, that's a good question. I think people usually work on like a family's boat or volunteer to work on a boat for free, or they have a little, like a little tiny John boat that they work on. They at least have stepped on a boat and been out to the ocean before. You just told me you're pretty much a landlubber." So Joan, being pretty desperate and pretty excited to work on a boat and become a sailor, that he offered to work on the boat for free. But the captain of the boat said, "No, you'll just get in the way. I'll have to be looking out for you. You'll be a hazard. You won't know what you're doing. You'll just be underfoot." So, downcast and dejected, Jome went back into the little town where the dock was. And it was a little town, but it wasn't too little that it didn't have a nice little coffee shop, a little cafe, where there was a little bell that rang on the door as he went in. And it was a little dark and shadowy in there and cool, and it was a good place for him to gather his thoughts. So he ordered a coffee, something a little bit sugary and sweet to kind of comfort him, because he thought he had earned it, because he had been working hard following that cow he recently, even though he had been following those long cows for so long he didn't even realize that's what he had been doing. Well, he sat there and drank his coffee, and he thought that maybe he would meet somebody there at the coffee shop that he could talk to, and they would be able to like give him advice and point him in a good direction for what to do next with his life. In fact, he was using the very last of his money buying the fancy little coffee, because now that he wasn't following the two long cows, he wasn't making any more money, because his main source of income had been picking up the gold coins that they occasionally pooped out. And he had been using those to go and feed himself at local diners and taverns while the cows slept at night at various barns along the road. But now he didn't even know where the cows were. He had stopped following them and they had continued on. He thought, should I go find them? He looked around. He looked around the coffee shop, but nobody was there to talk to him. Nobody was even looking at him. Everyone was on their phones or on their laptops or having engaging seeming conversations, and he wanted to be parts of their conversations, but he didn't even know who they were. They were all total strangers. So at the end of his rope, Joan went back home. It wasn't actually that far away. The cows had been walking in a big circle, but When he found his mom, she was so happy to see him, even though she knew where he had been because there had been a news crew following the weirdly long cows along, and she had seen him in the background. And even though he had been a little kid when she left, she knew he had always been headstrong, and she knew that the cows would take care of him, especially by pooping out coins so that he could have money to eat and feed himself. But she was still very, very, very happy that he was back home, even now he was now in his early 20s. But she was also very conflicted and had a lot of weird emotions welling up inside of her. And she tried to spank him to punish him, but he was too old for that, and he told her so. So she changed her mind and said, well, can you help out around the house a little bit at least? And so he fixed the screen door and made it so one of the wooden slats in the floor wouldn't creak anymore, and helped fix the dishwasher as well. And then he started getting restless again. He started wandering around outside more than staying at home. And one day he saw the two cows again. They really were walking in a circle, but they didn't seem that long anymore, and he couldn't tell if it was him or them, or if he had just spent so much time with them that they just seemed like normal cows. But then again, he realized he had never seen any other cows before. Maybe this is just what a cow looks like. And what is a cow anyways? As he stood in the road and watched the two magnificent beasts trundle by, he became more and more curious about what these things really were that he had devoted so much of his life to in the past. And so he rushed home and gathered all of his allowance from his mother, which was actually quite a bit because she had kept it all for him while he was gone. It was slowly building up week after week after week, year after year after year. And so it was over $714. He took it all, and he went to a little corner store in town and bought an iPhone. And then he got a data plan. And then he Googled, what is a cow? But it auto-completed to what is a candelabra. And he got very easily distracted. And he thought, what is a candelabra? He clicked on it. He saw that it was a very cool type of candle holder, essentially. I thought, well, I don't really need to know anything about that, but that is cool to know. So he went back to trying to figure out what a cow was, but then the next autocomplete option was, what is a cupboard? He looked at that and he thought, wow, cupboards. I think I would like to make those. What if I became a cupboard maker? So by the same time next year, he was enrolled in cabinetry and cupboard making school, and he hated it. But he kept going because there was something about him that was just persistent, and he wasn't a quitter. At least not. He thought, maybe I'll at least finish this semester, and then I'll know a thing or two about cupboards, and I'll be able to help my mother and pay her back for all the allowance she gave me, all the time she was patient with me. By the end of the first year of cupboard making school, he really was ready to quit, but he was still happy that he was completing his first real cupboard, a real nice piece of work that he had put a lot of effort into. And as he was finishing it up, the final touches involved putting a special hex on it, a special magical spell that would make whatever he put into it turn into a long cow. And you might be wondering, where did he learn such types of magic? And thinking back, he wasn't sure, but then he realized it had come from the cows themselves. As they walked, their feet had left little dusty patterns in the road, and over the years, these little patterns had been slowly ingrained into his subconscious. And as he finished up his cupboard, He drew these patterns. He etched them with a pocket knife onto the back of the cupboard. He wasn't really even sure what he was doing, but he gave the cupboard to his mother. She was happy. She was so glad that her son finally did something more useful. I mean, he had helped fix a washing machine, but he had also spent a lot of his life simply wandering around looking at the butts of two long cows. And so, on the day of his 26th birthday, right after his mother had given him a nice little cake, he said, "Hey, can you come out here into the garage? I have something to show you." She said, "Oh, what is it? What'd you do this time?" Because she always knew he was doing weird stuff. And he's like, "No, it's actually something nice this time. I promise." And so she came a little bit hesitant and wary, but she came. And when she saw the cupboard, when he pulled the sheet off of it in some kind of grand reveal, she really was impressed. And he was so happy with how impressed she looked. He thought, "Hey, I've finally done something worthwhile." And he was so glad that she really liked it. But he didn't want to make another cupboard because he hated that stuff. He didn't like working with his hands. He really just wanted to find another cool animal to follow around. So he stood outside in front of the house and waited for something else to show up. It took only about 5 minutes, though, before he heard a terrible crash from inside the house. A rending, an apocalyptic explosion. As he rushed back inside, he realized that his mother had tried putting something into the cupboard, and it had immediately been transformed into a long cow. Not only that, but she had put a whole tin of safety pins into the cupboard, and now each one of them was being transformed into a long cow. The cupboard was now smashed to smithereens, and the long cows were pouring out of the space where it had been like some weird, ungodly procession of explosive long cow, like a reverse black hole. It didn't make any sense, but it was tearing the garage and now the house apart. The long cows were landing on top of each other, squishing each other. There was blood and guts everywhere. His mom was barely escaping as she pushed and pulled and scrambled away from the ensuing chaos. And Jome stood there horrified, and he really should have acted and done something and maybe tried to help her or something, but he thought, everything I did, I thought I did something good for once, but it turned out to be the worst thing that's ever happened to my mother, the worst thing probably that's ever happened to this town. This is a small town. Animal control doesn't know how to handle this. A long cow infestation of this size and magnitude. What are they going to do? They're going to have to call in the National Guard. Long cows have huge teeth. As the long cows kept popping into existence from the same little point in space where the cabinet had been, where the tin of safety needles had been, Jome stood there in horror, watched it all happen, and eventually even his mother was crushed to death, and he just stood there thinking about the first time he saw a long cow as a little boy, and how he had followed it, and how his childhood had disappeared into days of just walking and looking. And he wondered now if maybe any of these long cows would be able to get up and walk away, or if they were all too injured, or if he could help them somehow maybe. He wasn't sure. But he just sat there and watched until it was all over. He knew it was too dangerous to try to intervene. But sure enough, after a couple of hours, they stopped popping and appearing, and one of them, no wait, 2 or 3 of them, got up and walked away. Before he knew it, Jome was walking right after them. there you go. I don't know what that story was, and I did take some breaks just to give my hand a rest that I'm gonna edit out. So don't be afraid to take some breaks, and you can think about what you want to do with the story next, what you want to do with the drawing next too. It's okay. Do whatever you want. No pressure. It's just a way to get the creative juices flowing. All right? See you later. Bye.